Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Insights and Perspectives from Giving USA's lead researcher, Unveiling the 2025 Results. This is presented by Indiana University's Lilly Family School of Philanthropy and also by Arreva. Just to get started, we will do some introductions. Then we will talk through the big picture from Giving USA. We'll also discuss how to understand today's giving environment. Then we'll discuss some actionable strategies and technologies that can help nonprofits solve some of the biggest challenges that they're facing. And finally, we'll finish with a Q&A session. We'll kick things off with our wonderful panel today. So with our introductions, thank you both so much for being here. First, Dr. Una Osili. Una Osili is the Efroimson Chair in Philanthropy, also the Professor of Economics and Philanthropic Studies, and the Associate Dean for Research and International Programs at Indiana University's Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. In addition, Dr. Una Osili also leads the research and the publication of Giving USA. Thank you so much for being here today, Una.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to join you all.
Wonderful, yeah. And thank you so much. And with David, David Blyer is also joining us on our panel today. David is our co-founder and CEO of Arreva. Thank you so much for being here today, David.
Hey, Nathan, thank you for having me. And Una, thank you for participating on this. I know our audience is going to love all the things that you have to say. I know I already have. So thank you so much for that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David. And I'll be moderating today's session here, filling in for Gabby. And I'm our Associate Director of Marketing here at Arreva. So first things first, some housekeeping items. We want to really make sure that you are engaging and getting your questions answered that you'd like to get answered. So for today's session, we ask that you use our Q&A chat feature. If you have a question about a topic as we're covering it on a slide, please do add your question into the Q&A chat feature, and we'll do our best to answer it live during the presentation. For any questions we don't get to answer kind of during the slides as we go through, we will have at least 10 minutes toward the end for a specific Q&A session where we'll do our best to answer all of your questions. And with that, I will kick things over to Dr. Una Osili to talk through the big picture.
Yes, thank you, Nathan, and thank you, Arreva, and thank you to all of you who've joined us. Welcome to Giving USA 2025. Every year, our team works around the clock, around 365 days a year, literally, to get this data to all of you in your various organizations. We are grateful to every single one of you. All the data points in this year's report represent a donor, a nonprofit leader, a fundraiser, someone who is working hard to make a difference. So this is an opportunity for all of us to celebrate the great work that's done in the philanthropic sector. This year, we are, of course, all navigating a changing terrain, lots of uncertainty, many moving and shifting environmental factors, both in the economic landscape, in the geopolitical ecosystem, but also in our respective organizations and our communities. But today I'm also here to share some of the news, the data-driven news that brings to bear and sheds light on the opportunities that are available in the philanthropic sector. So you will hear a lot about those opportunities in today's presentation. You'll also hear about some of the challenges and how we can best prepare for them. And I'm so pleased that David will be joining me to also share his own findings as we share some of these highlights. So on the next slide, we'll start with the headlines that everyone has been waiting for. Giving USA is the longest running report on charitable giving anywhere in the world. This data goes back to the 1950s, so we're able to see American generosity in good times as well as in adverse times. And this year, I'm so pleased to be able to share this high-level finding, probably the most important data point you'll take away, and that's that charitable giving reached a new high in current dollars of over $590 billion in 2024. A lot of the giving that we saw can be explained by a strong economy, particularly stellar financial markets in 2024, which provided a measure of financial and economic security to donors. In addition to the strong financial markets, we did note that inflation moderated after being stubbornly high for several years during and following the pandemic. And then finally, the overall environment was one where the economy grew in 2024, measured by GDP. Unemployment achieved lows. In other words, employment was quite strong. And then finally, we saw growth across a number of indices that we track, especially consumer confidence. So when adjusted for inflation, we still see that 2021 was the highest year in record, but it's also worth keeping in mind that last year's growth puts us in strong position for navigating a lot of the turbulence that we've seen in more recent terms. So I know that David had 1 or 2 points to mention here with his perspective, having seen nonprofits weathering storms of different types. What reflections might you have on this particular slide?
Well, I can tell you those individual gifts, according to 2/3 of all giving, are the backbone of the sector. There's no doubt about it. And, I really believe harnessing, a platform that lets organizations move beyond, and we're all hearing about the one size fits all appeals. I think those changes are already being made. And instead of using, real-time data to personalize stewardship, you really need to be able to predict donor behavior and build loyalty, and really giving you the ability to treat every donor as a unique partner. And nonprofits can, also protect this critical revenue stream that's going on today, but also unlock untapped growth through smarter segmentation within your database and targeting engagement differently. So again, this one concept of one size fits all doesn't exist anymore. And I think you need to continue moving on those things.
Wonderful. Okay, well, with that as a background, we're going to go to the next slide, which gives us a slightly different perspective on what's going on. David has already previewed this to some degree, but one benefit of tracking this data over time is that we can see where we've been as a nation, as a philanthropic sector, but also what that future looks like. As we dive deeper into the numbers, we have noted that individuals are the lion's share of American philanthropy, but increasingly, that picture of individual giving is also complex. We talk about individuals. This covers all of our age groups, our older Americans, baby boomers, also the Gen Zs, the millennials, the Gen Xers. And what we note is that all of these individuals face different philanthropic priorities. They have different motivations for giving and may have preferences around how they want to be engaged. In particular, the opportunity that I have to lift up is the growing number of older Americans who are reaching their peak giving years, and as such are thinking about their legacy and are interested in partnering with nonprofits around those legacy gifts. You may have heard those statistics about the great wealth transfer. Well, that is the moment. This is the moment that we've been waiting for around some estimate, some 30 trillion, some say it's as high as $80 trillion that will change hands in the next few decades. In addition, as we look into the future, there's also the question of how do we build a pipeline of future donors? And that is with our Gen Zs. Many of them are actually prioritizing their philanthropy at younger and younger ages and seeking to find organizations that they can support. So it is not just about the legacy gifts, it's also about bringing on these newer donors, the Gen Zs, the Instagram or Snapchat or even TikTok generation. This is also that moment. In addition, when we look at what has changed in the philanthropic sector, it is worth noting that foundations today now make up nearly 20% of all giving. Now, back in the 50s and 60s, and not even that long ago in the 1980s, foundations were a much smaller segment of American philanthropy, under 10%. So today, 1 out of every 5 charitable dollars comes from a foundation. Foundations are made up of small family foundations, as well as large operating foundations that are professionally staffed and have a sophisticated set of strategies that they're seeking to implement. During the pandemic, we saw that many foundations showed a great deal of flexibility and agility in their dealings with their nonprofit partners. Some increased their payout rates, many introduced multi-year grants, and some actually went into more trust-based philanthropy models, really seeking out partnerships that could help them meet their mission. As we look ahead, because we are now in an uncertain environment, navigating a lot of changing factors, economically, politically, and even socially and culturally. And here it's important for nonprofits, many of you who've joined us, to do the research on our potential and current foundation partners, and also understand that in some ways, we do have foundations that have a great deal of flexibility and are looking to partner in innovative ways. I sort of point out that many foundations stepped up during the COVID health crisis, and we're seeing some of that take place now. In addition, in this year's Giving USA report, we saw that corporate giving inched upward. It now makes up about 7% of all giving. It's still the smallest slice of the pie, but with a stellar stock market year, not just in 2024, but also 2023, many corporations are in a strong position. They've accumulated assets, strong balance sheets, and are also thinking about reinvigorating their partnerships with nonprofits. Now, with corporate giving, it is certainly becoming more strategic, more complex. Corporations may give out of their philanthropy bucket, maybe through their foundation, but many of them are interested in deep engagement. They may want more sponsorship opportunities, marketing opportunities, and increasingly the workplace channel is quite active where companies are matching their employee giving dollars, and in some cases, the hours that their employees volunteer. So you may have heard about dollars being matched, but also volunteer hours and doers are also being rewarded by some companies. Salesforce is a good example. So as we think about what we're seeing in the environment, there is this notion that philanthropy is becoming broader. It is not just about giving money. It's not just about giving time, but increasingly about talent and ties and testimony. In other words, how are you navigating this broader definition of philanthropy? And then finally, I want to mention charitable bequests, which now make up 8% of giving. But with our aging population here in the United States, we also see that with many individuals reaching those years where they're becoming quite intentional about plan giving, legacy gifts, that slice of the philanthropy pie is also poised to expand over time. Now let's go to the next slide.
Yes, and Una, right before we do that, just wanted to share one of the first questions we got from the audience, if that's all right. And
Yes,
they were wondering, kind of as we look at the total giving numbers, this is really wonderful to see as far as strength goes, right, in terms of giving, in terms of dollars. We had a question from Dusty here, wondering if there was any insights on the total number of donors. And they were asking because I guess the last 3 years, there had shown that there was a decrease in the number of donors. Just wanted to know if you had anything kind of diving into that metric there.
I am so glad that question was brought up. What we've been tracking over time are what we call broadly participation rates in philanthropy. And what we've seen is after a period of great stability in American philanthropy, we did see a decline in the fraction of Americans who give. So number of donors has declined, but dollars have risen. So we call this donors are down, but dollars are up. So inherent in these numbers is a challenge and an opportunity for all of us. How do we increase participation rates? How do we bring in the pipeline of future donors? How do we encourage more Americans to give and also reduce barriers, make it easier for them to give? When you put it all together, what we're seeing here is that among people who are giving, their giving numbers are going up. They're giving more than they did before. But the central challenge is, what about those folks who are not participating? How do we bring their ranks into philanthropy? How do we encourage, especially our younger Americans, to participate?
Yeah, what I'd love to add, I think you brought up a lot of good points. I mean, so many actually good points on this. But part of this is strategic partnerships, like you said. Nonprofits have to engage more with corporate, with foundations, with community partners. They will help you expand the reach, share resources, and if you can really co-design programs, that'll multiply your impact. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more on that. I also think integrating teams and collaboration. I mean, fundraising truly, it should be a team sport. Think of it that way, right? You got to align your development and your marketing and your programs and finance around shared goals and metrics to deliver seamless donor experiences. And you sort of mentioned it about compelling stories. I think facts and figures matter, but people give to stories. Build your case to support around real impact narratives that, resonate emotionally and logically. And I think some of the other things, organizations really need to know who and how to translate the data that they're getting today into strategy and investing in training so every team member can draw insights and act on them. And I think the last point is, I think executives, the executive teams and boards, I know we try and do this a lot, but they've got to prioritize innovation, accountability, and truly continuous learning to their staff that they feel truly empowered to truly cultivate the deep donor relationships even more than they've ever done this before. And I think the last piece of this, like you mentioned on agility, I think monitoring results closely. I know we do this every single day. We don't just try to make things feel good, but you've got to attract it and then test these approaches that you're doing. Are they working? Are you willing to pivot based upon what's working? Whether it's a new campaign model, a volunteer engagement strategy, whether it's board giving asks, but you've got it together. Really look at all the elements: the culture, the data, the collaboration, the storytelling, the partnerships, and the agility, and really complementing truly with a software investment that's going to turn and sustain these diverse growth things are going to really help continue going, in this direction.
Fantastic. That is wonderful. All right. Well, with all of that great background, we're going to go to the next slide. And keeping with this theme of American generosity, but also a changing landscape, on the next slide, you do see evidence of what we might think of as disruption in American philanthropy, but we also see a message of resilience and innovation. So how so? Well, let's start with the biggest slice of the pie, and that is the amount that goes to, and the fraction that goes to religious congregations. Today, that share is hovering around 24% of all giving. Religious congregations are still the largest destination of American philanthropy. However, we've seen many other subsectors grow over time. And if we were to dial back and rewind the tape back to the 50s and 60s, when Giving USA first started tracking, religious congregations received 2/3 of all giving. So there has been a dramatic shift over time. In addition, we've also seen more recent shifts taking place. In particular, human services, basic needs charities now make up the second largest slice of the pie. And this is a significant departure because for a long time, educational institutions were the number 2 destination. So now you can see that there has been some shifting taking place. And this can be explained by the pandemic era where many Americans prioritized basic needs charities. And so we've seen that continue even in this period. As we look ahead, we've also seen with more complexity and sophistication in the philanthropic landscape, one segment that has grown over time is the public society benefit, and that's organizations that serve a multitude of purposes. Donor advised funds, the national funds, sit under public society benefit, but so do United Ways and United Jewish Appeals. And then similarly, we've seen more giving going towards the environment, especially among younger Americans. And in addition to that, international causes, where the past few years, especially with the war in Ukraine, Americans have been directing dollars to help support humanitarian disasters beyond our own national borders. So as we take all this together, underneath all of these data points, is a very important story, and that is the innovation and the resilience within the nonprofit sector and being able to adapt to a changing landscape. During COVID in particular, we saw that many organizations, religious congregations, human service organizations, had to pivot in order to meet their donors where they are and also experiment with new methods of fundraising, online and virtual events, engagement models that relied on technology. And as we look ahead, there are more changes on the horizon, not just policy and legislative changes, but even on the technology side, where there are new tools and opportunities that nonprofits can actually use to improve their efficiencies and accelerate their impact. So as we go to the next slide, I want to put this data in a broader perspective. As we look at the Giving USA results with this record achieved of over $590, there is plenty to celebrate. And the story here, the through line, is one of American generosity. At the same time, we are facing a very different, some may say unprecedented environment in the years to come. And as we look at the data, this data gives us a lot to reflect on. In particular, one takeaway for our team has been that even in times of crisis, American philanthropy has persisted. In fact, even in a more recent period, 2020, where we did have a recession take place that year, by the end of the year, the economy had bounced back, the stock market had rebounded, and many companies were back at work. We saw giving rebound, and we actually ended up with a very strong year in 2020. So the message here is you've seen one recession, and for organizations to recognize that it is more about the nature of that recession, the length and the severity of the recession that will in fact affect outcomes. In addition, we also learned a lot of lessons from the Great Recession. We saw that organizations that continued to engage with donors, that communicated the challenges that they were facing and did not retreat from building relationships, managed to navigate the storm quite well and actually recovered much faster than organizations that pursued more of a retreat strategy. Let me just pause and ask David if he has any points on this particular slide.
No, I actually appreciate it, but I think you covered it very well.
Okay, excellent. Let's go to the next slide then. I'm sure there'll be lots of points to reflect on here. Okay, so as we look at where the giving came from in the most recent period, there are two big takeaways: individuals and corporations. Individuals had a very strong year. Growing individual giving grew at 8% in nominal terms, adjusting for inflation about 6%. We also saw very strong growth from corporations. And if we take both of these sources together and look behind those numbers, a lot of the results have to do with a strong economy. As we look ahead, we're also very conscious of how the current environment may or may not affect the different segments of giving. I think it's important to recognize that this is a time where foundations particularly have benefited from very strong market growth. So they are in a good position going forward, even in 2025, 2026 and beyond, as far as their giving goes. Charitable bequests, another segment to watch, because we are seeing even younger Americans expressing interest in legacy giving and also finding out that planned giving can be a differentiator in an uncertain environment where some donors may be more willing to make those legacy commitments because that allows them to really plan ahead compared to annual gifts. So I do know that David has some points on this, so I'm going to turn it over to him.
No, I appreciate that. You say it so well, but I'll just share a few points. But total giving was lifted significantly by individuals and corporate donors, and it's saying a lot, right? This signals a renewed sense of engagement, confidence among everyday donors and business leaders, and we've got to pay attention to that. People and companies are looking for meaningful ways to connect with causes that truly align with your values. And you said it. I mean, we're we're going outside the US, right? The international sectors, Ukraine, because they're really gaining attention to us. Not that it's always that meaningful for everybody, but there's a lot of impact on that. Nonprofits that really make their impact clear and relevant and continuous will attract support for their causes. And they may never have thought about those causes before, but because they're out there and they're telling the stories and they're in sharing this every day, it does make an impact. So you've got to really think about those things. And then the 3 or 4 giving sources grew in current dollars. I mean, that's a broad-based growth, which is important. It tells us that charitable giving isn't just about bouncing back in one sector, but there's resilience across multiple funding channels. The key now is for nonprofits to truly diversify and not just rely heavily on any one single stream. I mean, you've got to look at things a little differently. And then with like you said, the strong market performance, a solid economy, stabilizing inflation, which does change every single day recently, but played a big role in this. The financial environment gave donors more confidence and more capacity to give, frankly. And that's nice because as they're making more money, they're giving more, but that's nice. But we know the economy can shift very quickly. I think we see it almost daily, right, Una? But
yes, absolutely. I
yeah,
was going to say, we keep getting asked this question because certainly the current environment is very volatile. But I keep telling our colleagues, if you have one indicator to track, it would be look at financial markets, look at the stock market. And in some manner, current volatility is not necessarily a marker of where we might end up. So pay attention to what happens towards the end of the year. That's the giving season. That's when a lot of large commitments are made. And so how we finish the year is going to be more important than where we are sort of midpoint. And that's encouraging given some of the, I'd say, ups and downs that we've all navigated in the last few months. So let's go to the next slide. And here we are going to start to go behind the scenes. I'm going to take you right behind the scenes to better understand where the numbers come from, how that might impact your giving, and what your key takeaways should be. So here, I want to kind of put 2025 Giving USA numbers in a larger context. Over the last few decades, we've been tracking giving, and we've also seen that on average, giving grows in a good year by about maybe 6% in nominal terms, 3% adjusted for inflation. And so I think something that is very encouraging for all of us right now is that we are going into a more turbulent time with a very strong financial base. Total giving was at similar or even slightly higher than what we've seen in previous years. Financial markets have performed quite well over the last few years, which means many households, especially high net worth households, have strong balance sheets heading into this turbulent economy. In addition, companies have also had some strong years. 2023, the stock market did quite well. In addition, I keep pointing out the last 2 years have really been stellar years. And that means companies also have accumulated savings and have a strong financial footing going into 2025 and 2026. We had to use one word, it would be a steady picture that allows us to build a foundation as we then go into a more uncertain period. Finally, I think one other, I'd say, watchword as we move ahead is a sense of security that Americans feel. Giving tends to come from our discretionary income. People give when they feel financially and economically secure. And the last few years, especially on the financial market side, have provided a sense of stability for Americans, especially higher income households who are now able to make these stronger commitments. Now, as we go to the next slide.
Yes, and Una, we just had one question a little bit on the overall giving levels for the US. There was a question from Linda here around how US giving compares per capita still to currently to other similar countries.
I'm so glad someone asked that question because that is something that here at the school, we have a great deal of expertise. We host the Global Philanthropy Tracker and also the Global Philanthropy Environment Index. And the United States stands out by the whole size of our philanthropic economy, the size, the strength, and the complexity of our philanthropic sector. So we often say that no other country has the size and the complexity of our philanthropic sector. You may recall Tocqueville, Alexander de Tocqueville, who commented that Americans were unique in their ability to see a problem and take the actions that they needed to solve that problem. I think the fact that individuals are the largest slice of the pie is also worth noting, because in other countries, you may find foundations or corporations playing a bigger role. In the United States, the power of philanthropy still rests with individuals. This is really inspiring. You already heard the data points that nearly 2/3 of all giving comes from individuals, and that this has actually is a slight decrease, that it used to be higher, closer to 85–90% of all giving coming from individuals. But in this era that we live in, it's a reminder that individuals are the cornerstone of American philanthropy. And today, individuals are looking for opportunities to have that transformational impact. About a decade ago, the school participated in a study called $1 Million Ready, and it asked institutions how they can be ready to receive those transformational gifts. In many cases, we found that donors were very interested in large gifts. They didn't just want to write a check anymore, but they wanted deeper engagement. We call this the era of rising donor expectations. And nonprofits that are able to provide those transformational opportunities are the ones that are poised to receive those gifts. Now, you can see that corporate giving is also growing. Today, it's about 7% of overall giving. And corporations are looking for those kinds of meaningful partnerships as well. In some cases, they want opportunities for their employees to volunteer and to volunteer in a meaningful way. So whether that's skill-based volunteering or even in some cases virtual or in-person opportunities, providing that flexibility, that is an important concept. And then finally, with the legacy giving, one way to look at this data is that if we were to take all of the individual segments, half of the foundation segment, and all of charitable bequests, we would have something like 85% of giving still being driven by individuals. Again, a powerful data point as we think about building relationships and deepening those relationships so that they are ones of that are in positions to have transformational impact. Now,
Yeah,
yes, go ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna add a little bit to that, because I think it's important. I think we're seeing long-term trends reminds us that that competition for individual donations is increasing. Organizations need to use their data smarter and act a lot faster today. I mean, you've got to think about how to use AI, automation, advanced segmentation. I mean, your software should really help your nonprofit truly identify giving patterns, predict donor behavior, and act with relevance and precision. I mean, truly precision and asking the right things. I also think corporate giving, is hitting a high point. I think it's driven by a lot of factors, but employee engagement programs, strategic philanthropy. This is an area where nonprofits can win big with the right partnerships and storytelling. I mean, and I do believe, of course, software can play a crucial role here. Helping your organization manage corporate relationships, tracking matching gifts, and report on impact with transparency. Corporations expect. They want to see this. I've seen organizations, even on their websites, put specific impact reports highlighted. So when people are going to that, they see it relevantly. And corporate giving is still the smallest piece of the pie, but that means the upside is enormous. I mean, would you say that's a true statement, Una?
Absolutely. And back to the idea of the meaningful engagement is that companies are looking for partnerships, and those span both employee engagement opportunities, sponsorships, marketing, events, and in-kind contribution. So being aware of the, I'd say, growth in the wealth, but also in the array of vehicles that are available and channels that are available to nonprofits today. Now, just as we shared the broad opportunities that exist, we also want to lift up where those challenges are and what we can all do to start to change this picture. We have been tracking how much Americans give as a fraction of their disposable personal income. So you've heard the great news that giving has grown and that we are now in a new era of giving from a numbers perspective. But when we look at the share of our budgets that we allocate to philanthropy, the picture there looks more stagnant. In other words, Americans give about the same percentage of our income that we did 30, 40 years ago, about 2%. So the challenge to all of us on this call, our call to action is, what would we have to do differently in our day-to-day work to move the needle on this beyond this 2% number? Remember, the biblical mandate, or even if you look at Islamic religious tradition, is 2.5%. Biblical mandate, 10%. We are so far away from that. And there are three levels to this challenge. The first one, maybe there's something that nonprofits can do to inspire donors, to reduce the barriers, to make it easier to give. There's also the work that families and individuals can do to encourage younger people whether those are kids or mentees or even nieces and nephews, to build a tradition of philanthropy. And finally, in our communities and in our policy arena, what can we do to create more incentives around charitable giving? All right, let's move to the next slide and talk about another bright spot in this year's Giving USA report. We've mentioned that individuals were a particularly bright spot in this year's report, but it's important to highlight why individual giving grew and what we can do about it. Specifically, we mentioned already a strong economy and moderating inflation, but we also want to talk about consumer confidence and the fact that there was strength in how Americans were thinking about the economy. Finally, as we think about trends overall, we also saw strong giving by wealthy Americans that helped boost the overall picture here. You might say, well, what about everyday donors? How are they faring? And it's worth noting that while wealthy Americans have seen their portfolios rise, we haven't necessarily seen the same sort of growth across all of the income groups that we track. What is consistent, though, is that for all the income groups that we look at, for people of all different backgrounds, there's a strong commitment to philanthropy. At the beginning of this year, so even looking ahead, we had a number of tragedies like the wildfires in California. And what really stood out to us, because we see the data and we see those trends unfolding in real time, is the commitment that Americans of all backgrounds had to giving, and the fact that it cut across all the divides that we normally see. So the core story here is one around generosity and the role that individuals have. Sometimes that's through these peer-to-peer channels. That's proven to be very successful, where people ask others in their network to give. And so maybe one takeaway as we look at these results and say, what does it mean for this era, is how can you mobilize everyone in your organization, as well as activate all your donors, volunteers, board members, around the power of giving, whether that's using these peer channels, storytelling. As we said, giving goes beyond generosity. It's not just about giving money. It's not just the 3 T's anymore, time, talent, treasure. It also includes testimony, how you're using your platform, and ties, how you're using your networks. So let's go to the next slide. And here, we also want to emphasize where the opportunities are in the years ahead. Specifically, giving by foundations has crossed and exceeded $100 billion. And this is the 3rd year we've seen that. As we look ahead, we've highlighted that foundations typically give out of a 3 to 4 year rolling average. And so we anticipate that in the years ahead, foundations will be in a strong position to give. We've also seen quite a bit of experimentation in foundation giving, with foundations seeking to achieve impact and meet their mission. And so that actually allows nonprofits to engage current foundation partners, transparently share the work that you're doing and how you're moving the needle on issues, and also engage them in the ongoing challenges that you're facing. One, I'd say learning opportunity here, especially if we look back during the time of the Great Recession, is that many nonprofits didn't necessarily share what challenges they were facing and not so highlight the successes, but also the things that aren't going so well so that those foundations know how they can best support you. All right, now going to the next slide, we are now going to turn our attention to corporations. As we noted, corporations were a bright spot in this year's report, with giving by companies and corporations reaching a record high. This performance can be largely explained by the strong financial market performance, but also the fact that the pre-tax profits for companies across the board looked very strong and promising. In addition, the tech sector has kind of exceeded expectations. If you look at the data, the Magnificent Seven, it's called, have done quite well. And the promise of AI to increase efficiency and help corporations drive earnings has actually had a positive overall impact so far. What does this mean for all of you who are working in the nonprofit sector? This is a great time to engage your corporate partners, but do your homework first. If I have learned anything from working with companies, it's that they do want to partner with nonprofits, but they want informed partners who are familiar with their strategy, who understand what they're seeking to achieve, and can help them meet their goals. So there has to be essentially a meeting of the minds. I think one piece of feedback I got from corporate partners is that they get a lot of proposals that do not necessarily align with their strategic pillars or their vision. And so really figuring out, in some cases, it might be through the employee engagement realm rather than our volunteering opportunities, rather than the corporate philanthropy. So figuring out which of those channels best align with the work you're doing.
Yeah, we've seen this with our clients at Arreva. Corporate giving is evolving. I mean, it's shifting from what you had said, but from the traditional philanthropy towards strategic partnerships. And nonprofits that are succeeding in this space are leveraging the data to, truly identify the alignment between the corporate values. They're telling really measurable impact stories, and they're creating ongoing engagement. Like anything that's going on out there, if they're staying in front of them and they're engaging these partners in a very strategic way and understand their values. I also think the software can help, with integrated solution of, between a donor relationship management data with campaign metrics, helping organizations. Really, the goal there is really to turn those one-time gifts into long-term collaborations. With the 7%, it may seem modest. I know it's not. But the growth trajectory tells us there is major opportunity there too. I think, some of the key approaches is, corporations are increasingly seeking, and we're hearing a lot about this. I just left another event about cause marketing, employee engagement, and truly measuring those as a return on investment. And if you can really use the software that allowing your nonprofits to build on these custom, sponsorship packages, or track engagement by the companies, or deliver reports that speak the corporate language, turning that 7% into a scalable, sustainable is truly a revenue channel for you that will help you even further.
Fantastic. Okay, well, let's go to the next slide. We have just talked about the opportunities around corporate giving. I am, as someone who's been working on this data, working with this data for quite some time, we've also noted that the fraction that companies are giving to nonprofits has actually also been very stable. And if you look at the trend over time, it's been inching downward from where it used to be in the 1980s. If you are someone who's tracked this over time, you may remember that Paul Newman, with those his salad dressing, the company, you can still buy it at the grocery store. His vision was to encourage more companies to give a fraction of their proceeds to nonprofits. So what we have also taken away from this data is whether you're a consumer, you work with a corporate client, you work for a company, encouraging companies to think broadly about how they are allocating these corporate dollars and what fraction they're reinvesting in the nonprofit community. The data is certainly a very important standing in terms of helping us know where we've been, but also where it's possible to go. Now,
Yes, and
oh yes,
oh, Una, just quick, wanted to jump in with a question from the
yes,
audience on corporate giving. This has more to do with kind of how things are categorized. So the question is, if a corporate gift is from a corporate foundation, is that kind of in the breakouts, between foundation and corporations and in the Giving USA data, is that being categorized under foundation, or is that generally being categorized under corporation?
very good question. I'm glad you brought that up. So corporate foundations are included with corporate giving. So we add the foundations to the companies themselves. So what you're seeing here includes the corporate foundations.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, let's go quickly through the next few slides to leave as much time for questions as possible. We've also seen some shifts in the nonprofit sector. If you're someone that likes change and you're comfortable with, I'd say, disruption, there's lots of evidence in the sector that things are not staying the same. But David, let you jump in. You may have something to add here.
Well, you add a lot of good points, but I think just the one big thing in giving to individuals, in-kind gifts are really important, right? So the rise in in-kind gifts that donors want to give, is more of a tangible resource, not just dollars. But if you're really, I think the nonprofits need to put in place more of a robust sort of an inventory management, evaluation controls, stewardship workflow. So every in-kind donation truly translates more into a real-time program impact. And I do believe by treating non-cash gifts with the same rigor as cash reinforces donor trust and really could unlock new streams of support within the organization.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, I know that we have a couple more slides to go through. So I just want to highlight that in this environment, we are paying close attention to what's staying the same and what's changing. And just want to emphasize that organizations that are navigating this environment are ones that have built the innovation muscle. You can see that human service organizations have inched up. They're now the second leading destination in American philanthropy. And that's because during the pandemic, many Americans prioritized giving to basic needs. They saw the need, they saw the opportunity to make a difference, and they stepped up and stepped forward. And so some of that has continued even in the current period. On the next slide, just to make sure that we get through our key findings and leave some time for questions, I also want to emphasize that in this 2024 report, there's also a hopeful story, and that is that a lot of sectors that struggled during the pandemic have recovered. In particular, we note that health giving, which faltered a bit during the pandemic because many healthcare organizations depended on in-person fundraising, events, walks, and runs. We've seen some recovery in health, in the arts, and also in international giving. Some of these subsectors did see a bit of a decline, as we noted, during the pandemic, and some of the other, say, adapting to new ways of raising funds, staging events, and even with respect to earned income. As we look to the last couple of slides on the next set of findings, we also found that of the 9 recipient categories that we track, 7 of them grew even after adjusting for inflation. So we see broad-based growth across health, human services, international, many of the subsectors that all of you represent. And that puts us in a very strong position as we move into 2025, where there has been quite a bit that has been changing on the federal landscape, but even at the state and local level. And then I'll just mention one last slide here, and that is a data point that we've been tracking. And I know David will have quite a bit to add here. For the past few years, we have been looking at how much of giving, American giving, is taking place online. And you can see that it's been growing over time, but the pandemic was an inflection point where, for the first time, online giving now accounts for more than 10% of all giving, and it's continued to grow. What this means is that donors are increasingly seeking, of course, frictionless opportunities to give, making their donations online, and it's donors of all different backgrounds. Some are using online methods to learn about causes, to learn about organizations. You hear digital first, where whether it's through social media, online, and through other channels, they are navigating the nonprofit experience. They're starting online first, and then perhaps moving to an in-person and other virtual experiences. The lesson from all of this data is that we need to meet donors where they are. And if they are online, we also need to show up in those spaces. It's also important to recognize through the online methodologies that giving donors options in terms of how they make those gifts, where they make those gifts, the kinds of events. This is really an era of opportunity, but also, as we said, understanding the data and navigating a changing environment. So I will just close by going back to the beginning of the presentation and saying that we have so many new opportunities that are before us, but consistent theme has been the generosity of Americans. So at this point, I will turn it over to David to share some reflections on implications and the so what from his perspective.
Well, you say so many wonderful things. I'll just, and I know we want to leave a few minutes for time, but just to add, I mean, since there is a surge in individual giving, giving by individuals rebound after multi-year declines, which is nice. It's driven, some of this is, not all of it, but some of it is driven by compelling causes, right? Increased trust in nonprofits that are being more transparent today. You said it a lot. Telling your story, I mean, telling your challenges is really important. I hear it every single day. And this really will help improve engagement with your strategies and your donors. I also think urgency. I mean, sometimes mission-driven urgency. We've seen this even through peer-to-peer fundraising, whether it's social, environmental, global health challenges, but these remain, the front and center. And truly, it does motivate donors. I'm seeing this more so than ever before. So donors, they're not just responding with dollars, but with intention and urgency. So if you have a need that needs 45 days, explain that need. And also I see organizations that they're really embracing really a digital first strategy. Personalized email outreaches, like you said, online giving is so important. And making sure within that online giving, Una, I hear so much about even matching gifts, but you talk about it, and I don't just mean you personally, but I hear so many people talk about it, but there's not a reflection even within their software. You need to have that within your software platform. So you'll see better retentions in doing these and increased gift sizes potentially as well. And then, there's a big movement with donor advised funds and legacy giving. So, really look at those from a strategic perspective. If it's not on your site, you should really have it on your site. And I know we're jumping forward. For those of you that never heard about Arreva, we've been around for 30 plus years. We have thousands of clients worldwide, primarily in the US. Our clients have done wonderful things through our different software as an only all-in-one. And Nathan, you could go through this a little faster for us, but what we've done at Arreva is really identified a challenge, and I think you're hearing all about it, every single day, even with the increases in individual donations. But moving data around is causing a decline in potentially donor acquisition. It could be causing a decline in donor retention, and retention doesn't mean that you lost a donor. It could mean that donor gave to somebody else and gave you less, and maybe that impact that you were giving years ago isn't the same impact, or maybe your messaging needs to change. But these are things that Arreva has done, with our software. And really, I think some of the solution is providing an all-in-one solution, meaning everything is unified, everything within one single database. It's no longer moving data around. It's really giving you the ability to react immediately and create better best practices to acknowledge those people that are giving the donations or registering for events or giving a DAF or whatever that would be. You need to act quickly. You need to be able to pivot quickly, whether it's, embedding AI into your activities and making a clearer message. But there's a lot that you could do. And really, Arreva provides many applications, and they're not standalone applications. You don't have to buy everything today, but we offer a lot of applications that we've learned over decades and decades of what the nonprofit industries need and want today to succeed, and that's what we're doing. So we're really happy that we can be participating with Una in this report and sharing some insights of what we have and solutions on how to do that. And if you want to learn more, please let us know. But next, Nathan?
Yeah, and David, I think that takes us to our really quick poll question that we had. And then we will get right into the Q&A. The poll question here is if you'd like a free fundraising and donor relationship management consultation and demo of Exceed Further. And I will get that up for everyone here in just a second. Just giving people 1 minute to respond, and then we'll get right into Q&A. All right, thank you so much. And with that, we will move forward into our Q&A. So thank you so much, everyone, for presenting. I will start us off. This is probably mostly for Una, this question. We have a question from Ben on what are the best ways to grow more donations from Gen Z, Gen X, and millennials?
Wonderful. Well, we have a new report if you're interested in that question on next gen donors, and I'll be happy to share it with the team so they can circulate that more widely. What we found is that it's really important to understand their motivations, why they want to give, how they want to give, and also what channels work best. We've also learned that they want more engagement than their parents or grandparents. They want to be more involved. I think one quote that comes from the webinar that we just held was that they don't want their name in on a building. They'd rather be involved in how the gift is being made. So that means providing high quality volunteer opportunities for them. That involves, in some cases, it's a in-person or virtual site visit. We just had an organization that I'm on the board of, just had some of the young next-gen family members come for some of the site visits, really engaging them. And they spent more time really trying to understand the organization, how they were meeting their mission, the challenges they were facing. Many of them said they wanted to come back and volunteer and intern with the organization. So really thinking about those engagement opportunities, they may look very different from what you've done in the past, but just having seen that up close, I can tell you that really stewarding Gen Z and millennial donors is quite different, that level of engagement that they want. But then the flip side of that is that once you engage them, you now have access not just to those donors, but to their networks. They're going to go back and bring their friends and share on social media. So really their definition of generosity and philanthropy is much broader. It definitely includes the time, of course, the testimony using their platforms, and also their ties, their networks. And so you definitely see that in engagement strategies that are successful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Osili. We do have a question on methodology from James. It's asking, has the Giving USA methodology for measuring giving from individuals changed since the tax law was changed in 2017?
I love this question because this is clearly a fellow data person, someone who appreciates data. So fortunately for us at the Giving USA kind of standpoint and at the Lilly Family School, we've had a methodology for tracking non-itemizer giving for quite some time. With tax reform, it just means that more giving is, of course, no longer captured through the US tax code because a majority of Americans, now about 90% of Americans, are no longer itemizing. The good news is we were already tracking non-itemizer giving through our philanthropy panel study. And so we are able now going forward to estimate how much comes from the itemizers and how much comes from non-itemizers. And if you're interested in the Giving USA methodology section, we go into more detail around this. So feel free to refer to the report and the methodology section. But fantastic question and terrific set of insights.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And we actually had some questions around, there was one more around kind of categorization. And so this has to do with a really exciting topic, which are the donor advised funds, asking around how those donor advised fund gifts and contributions are counted as far as categories of sources go. So are they counted as coming from individuals, coming from foundations, or something else?
Great question again. On the donor side, we count them as individual gifts because those gifts are made by individuals when they set up those donor advised funds, and they typically receive a tax recognition when they make those gifts. On the destination side of charitable giving, I mentioned that donor advised funds are of many different varieties. And so the National Donor Advised Funds, Fidelity, DAF, Giving 360, Vanguard are housed under the Public Society benefit, but we count community foundation, DAFs under foundations. And then there are what we call single issue charity DAFs. So one example is National Christian Foundation. That's counted under religious because all of those funds have to go to motivated by a religious cause. And similarly, hospitals, some hospitals host DAFs, so do universities. And so DAFs would be counted under the destination area that they're most closely affiliated with.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And I know we're running up on time here, but I'll ask one more question from the audience. And that was around if Giving USA happens to have a breakdown of the percentage of giving that's kind of to regional, and I think that the question is really more around local versus national and international giving. And so just wanted to understand kind of if there's anything when it comes to geography there.
Yeah, so we do track how much goes internationally. If you're interested in understanding more by channel, for example, what fraction of DAF grants are local versus national versus international, in the Giving USA chapters, we have some data around that. So the book will be out in July, the full book. Go to the website and you can order your actual publication, which covers every single type of giving segment, and as well as the destination areas. And you can learn more about this local versus global distinction.
Wonderful. I think that's all we have time for today. We got through a vast majority of the questions, so thank you so much. As always, it's a pleasure. And yeah, this was really a truly amazing session. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everyone attending. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you on our next webinar. Make it a great day.
Thanks, Una. Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for
Bye-bye.
attending.
Thank you all.